everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast for backlocked banter, where we look at all the Best Picture winners, and for the last couple years, all the Best Picture nominees. And that's what we are doing today. My name is Timo. Of course, I am joined by the usual crew, Abram, Tanner, Tucker. Oh my God, great to be talking with you guys again. Today, we will speak over the film from James Cameron 2022. Of course, like all the films, Avatar, The Way of Water. It's nominated for a Best Picture, and thus we are here speaking about it. I can't wait to talk about this film because I got really hyped in the months leading up to its release, and then it came out a couple months ago, and I rewatched it today, and I've got some thoughts over it, and I hope you do as well. But before we dive into the oceans of Pandora and connect our hair follicle links to each other and join in one union of movie analysis, we got to recap what happened last week, because we talked about All Quiet on the Western Front, and boy oh boy, we really couldn't figure out if that was any better or any worse than Everything Everywhere All at Once. We ranked them at the same place. In fact, we were so stymied that we had to hand over the adjudication to the mathematician, the computer, who then decided that Everything Everywhere All at Once, by a margin of 0.05 points, is better than All Quiet on the Western Front. But we were split, let it be known, in the who thinks which one is better. So if you have an opinion on that matter, let us know down in the comments. And while it hasn't been cited, the possibility that we have we relook at that score later on in a couple months is always out there. And now, since we're recording this in real rapid fashion right at the beginning of our month of pleasure, I'll call it, in which we watch all these movies twice a week and do all that stuff, make these episodes in bang slapdash fashion, we don't have a featured comment, but we can hand it over to one of you's blue fellas to tell me what the plot of Avatar 2 is. Abram, you want to tell me it, so give it to me. Give it to me straight.
Here's the reason I want to give you. Here's the reason I want to give you the plot synopsis. And I remember the names of every character in this movie, and I usually don't. This is rare, and this is strange because these names are complete sci-fi nonsense, but I remember them. So, deep breath, here we go, right? This is the sequel to Avatar, in which Quaritch has returned. Somehow Quaritch has returned, and he is here to hunt down Jake Sully, the leader of the Avatar resistance, after once again the Sky People have returned to the planet of Pandora to harvest it for resources. But the film's really not about another war between the Sky People and the Na'vi as much as it is about Quaritch hunting down Jake Sully. And to get out of the way of endangering the rest of the tribe, Jake Sully takes his family, which includes Nadiri, Loak, Neteum, Took, and Kiri.
He got them all! Oh my God!
The water people. And as the film unfolds, we learn about this new culture. We show down against Quaritch again, and that's kind of the plot. Yep. So, again, I just want to flex on all the characters' names, including Spider.
Including Spider is also there.
The Tulkhan and Payakan, the number one outcast Tulkhan. Are there any other characters in the movie? I hope not, because I don't remember.
Ronal,
Tanner's Twitter account name.
Sonawari.
yes. Edie Falco. That's an actress.
Corporal Lyle Wainfleet.
Everyone's favorite. Sure. Sea Dog.
Okay. All right. Enough.
Okay.
You guys are flexing too much. I want you to flex what you thought of the movie. Because that was a good plot synopsis. Do you want me to start?
We've all seen this film before already. This is a rewatch for all of us. A second watch for all of us?
Yeah. A second in the theaters watch.
Yes. And I think this is, rightfully so, one of the Best Picture winners that has stayed in the theater since its original theatrical debut. And justifiably so, this is a film that must be seen on the big screen to be believed. And when I first watched it, Tucker and I, and Abram, correct? We did a big old review for this bad boy back in...
I was in London.
Well, that's pretty disappointing. Anyway, Tucker and I did a review for it when this film first came out, and if you have seen that video, you'd remember that my one big gripe with the film was the variable frame rate. And thankfully, we were able to see it in not 3D, so therefore not variable frame rate this time around. And it did improve my viewing experience, but not as much as I would not as much as I would have thought. And that's not a bad thing, because I was able to enjoy the action sequences a little bit more, but still really sink into the script, the world, the characters that James Cameron and everybody involved with the massive production that is Avatar: The Way of Water has graciously bestowed upon the viewing world.
That's
Wow.
and that's most of the world at this point.
Yeah,
I believe
yeah.
as of we're talking, it's the fourth highest grossing movie in human history. So
Mhm.
the Avatar has no cultural resonance and will not stick around. And let's bet against James Cameron. We all know that's horseshit by this point. You never do it. You're not going to do it the next time another one of these
Mhm.
movies comes out, which is next year, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, second viewing, I liked it a lot on the first time. I was a little bit wavering in our review. Is it better than the first one? The first one establishes the world that's so unique. You know, it was something fresh because it was a new franchise. But what I think was so impressive on the second viewing is I was able to, like you said, Tanner, sit with the characters a lot more. I knew all their names going in. I knew their dynamics going in. I knew what was going to happen because I'd seen it before, and I was able to notice how the script does setups and payoffs and develops characters in very subtle ways that are relatively simple. This isn't a super complex, incredibly nuanced character story, but there's such a wide variety of cast. I think they all play into the themes of the film incredibly well, and obviously just the visual spectacle is so impressive that placed on top of characters that I genuinely care about and find very interesting. I'm so excited that this is doing as well as it is, and that means that we will continue this being a franchise, and who knows, maybe also continuing to be nominated for Best Picture.
More, five.
Who the hell
more.
knows? But that's so exciting. I think it has so much potential because of what they did in this film. Primarily, I think its strongest suit is giving us a full cast of characters to work with, each with different personalities, different roles to play, different dynamics, and that's what I really love about Avatar: The Way of Water. I care about all of the Sully clan now, even though there are some that I think we'll talk about get a little bit sidelined. There is now multiple more movies with multiple characters that have been established that we can flesh them out in the future and continue their storylines. And I'm so happy with what they did here.
Mm-hmm.
I love this movie.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Abram, do you want to go, or shall I jump on the eek or the ook or whatever the things are called that they ride around in on the ocean?
The Ikron.
The
No,
Ikron.
no. Well,
you
you could be
fake
talking about the
fan?
Ikron. You could be talking about the Elu. Is the mount of the water tribe.
Timo, you go next.
Okay. Yes.
yes.
Not the Omatikaya, who are the
Not to be confused with the Omatikaya,
Oh,
of course.
silly human. I like this movie a great amount the second time. I think I really agree with what you have to say, Tucker, in that I found myself really being able to view the story and the characters a lot better this second time. You know, Tanner, I don't even notice the variable frame rate when I'm watching it.
Yeah, some people don't.
So
No.
like it's not a big deal to me, but I went and saw it in 3D again. God, the 3D on this movie is so good. Like, oh, it's just like if that were what like all film production would look like, which would be is a crazy thought. The medium is varied and different, and we don't have to do 3D every time. But I think the way that this film just like, it's so visually beautiful for like every second, and there's like never an immersion breaking shot, in my opinion. And I think that you're exactly right that this film is a spectacular film and that James Cameron kind of knows it. And in moments where you are like, there isn't anything really like going on, characters just kind of like, whoa, look at that. The coral reefs. I am learning to swim. Like, these are moments that could feel slow and dragging, but I find that the visuals and the spectacle, they are so strong, especially in those moments where Cameron is really flexing his ability to like keep you interested. I still find myself being in a similar state as the characters when they are viewing this world and these new parts for the first time. We are in a similar case as viewers. Our characters and us aren't so different anymore because we've moved them out of their comfort zone, and so we get to see new stuff for the first time, as do they. And I think that synergy between like the perspective of our audience and our protagonists like helps drag us through the film, even though I don't think this film drags very much at all. There is a lot that happens in it, and it fills up that 3.5 hour runtime like pretty well. So spectacular. I think the story works. I call it an Avatar story. I think the story is very much in line with how like the first story was. So I'm not being totally blown away by what this film is saying, but I find that it has stuff to say and it says it well.
Yeah, I liked it more the second time. The first time I saw the film, I was in the UK. Probably already red flag for most people in the audience hearing that. But I was seeing it in this theater called a Tivoli theater. I don't know if it's a chain, but it's a very high end, like full service eatery sort of theater. You literally enter it and you go downstairs into what looks like this like hotel bar lobby situation. And so we were ordering like ice cream sundaes and tea, and then we went into the theater and we're eating like artisanal popcorn, and I was drinking like high end alcohol. And I wasn't seeing it in 3D. It was a fairly small screen. I contextualize that all because on my rewatch, I was in a shitty, gross theater in the Providence Place Mall in Rhode Island with a huge fucking IMAX in 3D eating buttery, gross popcorn and Skittles. And that's the way to see The Way of Water, I think, because you guys are right. It is about the spectacle. And I appreciated that a lot more on the second watch. I also was able to, which I think is a pretty universal theme, not only on this panel, but in the larger conversation about Avatar, I was able to appreciate the characters and the narrative a lot more on second watch. So I like the film more. But I just still don't think it's that impressive beyond the technical fidelity. I don't think that the plot is that interesting. I do think that it drags a lot. And I find that a lot of the characters, a couple in particular that I want to talk about, just don't really move the needle for me. And so I find myself liking it more, but not thinking it's a better movie, if that makes sense. And I want to sort of talk about that, because I think that the entertainment value for me was higher in these different viewing conditions and being able to sort of come in understanding the characters a little bit better.
Yeah.
But even still, I understood them better, but I didn't really get much more out of them, I suppose. And I'll talk about that as we get deeper into it. But yeah, I don't get the Avatar love the way you guys do, and so I'm excited to sort of to dissect that a little bit more during the review.
Okay,
Yeah.
before Tanner, I think we're on the same line of thinking here.
Great minds, Timo.
Yeah, what was this film nominated for? Before we jump in and hit our finer points.
Well, we've come hot off of two of the most nominated films of the ceremony, Everything Everywhere All at Once with 11 nominations, and most recently All Quiet on the Western Front with 9 nominations. Now, sadly, I might add, Avatar: The Way of Water only got 4 nominations at this year's Oscars. Best Picture, of course, but also Achievement in Production Design, Achievement in Visual Effects, and Best Sound.
Yeah.
So, still lots of things to talk about there, because production design and visual effects are what this film is all about, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is the massive production of it all. We've all seen the behind-the-scenes photos of our actors in mocap suits actually underwater, and obviously the visual effects goes hand in hand with that. But where would we like to start talking about this film?
There's one thing that I think is kind of overlooked for this film, but I think is one of the reasons I find it so much more compelling now that I've sat with it versus that first movie, which is it's not a huge change, but I think that the way that they changed Jake Sully as a character from the first movie to this movie instantly attaches me much more to the world of Pandora, and of course by extension his family, because in that first movie he's kind of just a grunt guy. He's going through the classic like story trope of I'm in an environment that I'm not quite familiar with, and I gotta learn how to shoot a bow and ride the local fauna. But I think the fact that they give him a family here and by extension give him so much more emotion to work with, and I think Sam Worthington has improved as a performer in the past 13 years, there is I think a sizable jump in quality in terms of how much I care about Jake Sully as a character, even though he's not the best part of this movie even close. I think that all of his children, for the most part, are more interesting characters. Obviously, it's visual effects, but Jake Sully is improved, and he was the core of that first movie. But it was almost a meme of like, you're really gonna like Jake Sully as a character? Nah. But I do think he's a good character here. I think that his connection to his family, the emotion he portrays, and again, the performance of Sam Worthington is all a lot better here. And it's like, good on you. You improved something that was kind of lacking in the first film.
To me, this is one of the first points where I immediately am off the Avatar train, because I don't really like Jake Sully. But again, I think that's sort of where my two sides of the same coin of enjoying the film more but not thinking it's better begin to come in. Because I think you're right, Tucker. I think Sam Worthington gives a good performance, and on this watch, let's get it done. Got me hyped in the second time watching. I think he delivers those lines very nicely. But my problem for me with Jake Sully is that, with a couple exceptions, the trope of the guy who's like pushing his sons too hard because he wants to keep them safe, or being this sort of just military man who's now leading the smaller tribe, but it's a family and you can't treat him like a squadron. It's just not that unique to me, I suppose.
Sure, yeah.
And so I think that it's a good performance, but it's built on top of such a boring archetype, I think, which is why I'm excited to hear that Loak is, I believe, going to be sort of like the main vehicle for Avatar 3.
He is the narrator, for sure.
Okay,
so yes,
cool.
most likely our protagonist, our main protagonist.
Because I don't find a whole lot to grab onto in Jake Sully. I'm much more interested in the kids, as we'll talk 100%, about.
100%, yeah.
But I just think that some of the things that made him unique, in that he was paralyzed from the first film, being that he was paralyzed and then finds the ability to walk and has to sort of rethink his entire like human allegiance and all these things. He had more going on in that first film that I think set him apart, opposed to this one where he just feels like an archetype. And so I don't really get a whole lot out of Jake Sully beyond a couple moments that we'll definitely talk about in particular.
You know, I think the way that I view Jake Sully, perhaps in a bit more positive light, I appreciate his archetypal nature in that we are in such a different setting, and that the ways in which this archetype is shown in Avatar is shown a lot differently than it would be if we were just watching like a mumblecore movie. Like that archetype could still exist, but Greta Gerwig would do it way differently than it's done in this like totally unrealistic, except strangely very realistic, totally unreal world. I think that's a better way to say it. I think that Jake Sully, as this like father who is trying to learn how to like untrain his military mind and to be like that family figure more than the sergeant, like that is an interesting character transformation that I can see play out in the movie. And I don't feel like the film, once we reach moments of where Jake Sully like becomes like a better father, the film doesn't hammer us over the head that happened. I think that his changes are portrayed somewhat subtly in ways where like even though his words might be similar to at the beginning, he's still gruff with his sons. He still tries to put order on them and try to keep them safe, as you might say from his perspective, but he's maybe kind of domineering from the kid's perspective. Like as the film goes on, there are just little moments where it's like, yeah, he's not softening, but he's loving. He's becoming like a real father. And I feel that like fatherly energy from him in the film, even if like that is like his entire character in the movie, is that he is a dad and he's got to figure out how to be a dad.
Yeah. I would say that, Jake Sully's characterization doesn't live and die with this like jarhead, not jughead, the jarhead archetype. Not the Riverdale character. But it doesn't live and die with his like marine archetype. I think that this film, and particularly Jake Sully and Neteyam and Loak, are really concerned with fatherhood. This is a film about being a father. I mean, it's very evident from Jake's narration, where he says, "Excuse me, I wrote it down. A father protects. It's what gives him meaning. One life ends and another begins." And that is said at the beginning of the film, but it is given new context at the end when, we get one son for another. One life ends, another begins. And Jake comes to understand as well what it means to protect. That you can't run your family like a military squadron and order them around. You have to, yes, protect your children, but also allow them to live their lives and at times protect you and save you.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a really compelling character arc, and I would love to see where it goes in the future of this franchise. But I do, in this entire review, want to focus on the way of water more than like what will happen in the future and stuff like that. But I think the character arc, as it stands in the way of water, is very strong as it concerns Jake, Neteyam, and Loak. And I do lament the lack of Neytiri in this film. I think that Zoe Saldana is a fantastic presence when she is allowed to be in this film. I would love for more characterization because we have the time. This film could have been 3 hours 20, 3 hours 25. Give us a little bit more Neytiri, James Cameron. But
Yes.
I think the seeds of her character, and I just said I don't want to talk about what's coming in the future, but I'm going to. The seeds of her character of like being distrusting of humans and how Spider will play into that whole thing, and just how she acts when she is slaughtering these humans, and the way that Spider looks at her, especially at the very
that's
end,
quite the scene.
is all so powerful. But I went on a little rant there. I went a little off target talking about Jake Sully. So, Tucker.
Neytiri would never be off target, though.
No, absolutely not.
No, she could be flying at
She's a very good
200
archer.
miles an hour and still hit that arrow.
I will point out the moment between her and Jake that I do think is effective to the end you guys are talking about after Neteyam and Loak sort of disobey and come down to gather the guns from the train heist they do.
The maglev.
Yeah, apologies. Train.
It's Abram. You have my permission. It's a fucking train, dude.
It's a goddamn show.
It's very Lawrence of Arabia core, to be honest.
It
with you, that
is,
whole
man.
sequence.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Cameron like referenced that.
Probably, yeah. But that moment where she's like, "You got to stop treating them like a." Again, this is not a subtle movie, but you got to stop.
No.
You can't stop treating them like they're your soldiers. He says, "Well, I almost lost them, right?" And I think what's effective about that scene, or similarly, the moment when Loak is helping him get out of the water, and Jake puts his hand on Loak's face and like, I see you, son, or whatever he says. Jake needs to be put against somebody who can force him to say what the movie is about. I think to progress his character arc, and part of my problem with the film is I think you're right that this is his arc, but this is a movie where there's a whole lot of plot, but I don't feel like it actually spends enough time digging into what these ideas about fatherhood means. And a good example for me is the fact that when we're with the Met Kaina, am I right?
Yeah.
Just
in the ballpark.
Yeah.
Met
Kaina.
In the Met Kaina tribe, I think this script is weird in that it has these very like cyclical ideas of what's going to happen to these characters over and over again. And so we spend a long time with the Met Kaina wherein Loak and Neteyam just get in trouble.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the getting in trouble part of the movie.
We're in the antics.
Right, but the outcome of all of those is the same. It's Jake Sully threatens to put a knot in my tail, and then we move on to the next instance of him getting in trouble. I think that the movie is so concerned with just showing us things and having our characters do stuff that we don't spend enough time stopping to talk about what these things mean until the movie decides we're going to stop everything and tell you expressly how our characters feel about what's happened for the last 25 minutes of the movie. The example being who is the son of the chief? What's his name?
I don't
The Water People Chief. The son of the Water People Chief is how I'm going to refer to him, right?
Aonong.
When Aonong is supposed to get in trouble for taking Loak out beyond the reef, and Loak says, "No, actually, it was my idea, right? It wasn't your son's idea. I said we should go beyond the reef. He tried to stop me." And then the dad's like, damn, okay, whatever. The pair of sons walk away, and Loak says, "Well, I did that because I'm always a disappointment, and I didn't want you to be a disappointment." And there it is. And what I'm trying to say is I just don't feel like the script takes us to many organic moments to flesh out this idea of fatherhood that you guys are saying. I think it's really concerned with just showing us plot ideas until it's time for and here's what that plot idea meant. And for me, that's part of why I just view Jake Sully as one big archetype, because with the exception of these couple moments, I don't feel like he has time to actually organically learn about fatherhood.
Well, I would push back on that a little bit because I think that the progression event is what pushes him to learn about fatherhood. I think that's like things happening and you learning from them is, I don't know, kind of how life works and progression of events works. But I'm not going to dwell on that. I do think that where the theme of fatherhood and family is drawn into stronger conversation, I think, is through the wider cast of characters that I would like to shift our focus to, expressly the parallel of Loak, Neteyab, and Jake with Spider and Quaritch, who are much more conflicted father-son dynamic, and understanding what fatherhood means through like multiple levels of sci-fi bullshittery, where it's like, okay, your dad died and his body was brought back, but now with the memories and but we're not related, or we're different species. Like, these are ridiculous things.
Species.
Yeah, but these two characters, I think, are not the greatest characters in the movie, but what they stand for in terms of family theme, in terms of family concept and how they relate to each other, and by extension the rest of the cast, is very fascinating because it's put this spin. The spin is put on it by sci-fi horseshit. There's ideas that have to be wrestled with that make it more engaging, and that applies to the rest of the cast as well. And I think that, again, another way that this is a step up from that first film is Quaritch in that first film is just a cartoon bad guy. He's just a hoorah, shoot shit, blow up the tree bad guy. But in this film, he is the same person, but he's a very different character because he has to wrestle with the fact that he's been put into the body of his enemy, and that he's not the one that knows how his own body works to the best. He has to learn from Spider, and he has to adapt to the environment. I think putting the villain through this pretty shallow but still present character arc of learning the world like the rest of the characters are learning the world as we see them with the Metkaina tribe, that is that's a much more interesting way to include an antagonist, but have him be like an understandable antagonist, much more so than just a cartoony hoorah, blow up the tree bad guy that he was in the first one.
I think Quaritch is... Sorry, Timo looks like he was sort of ruminating. So
I was ruminating, but no ruminations were like presently like I must speak. Okay. You know. So go ahead. I'm enjoying listening to what you have to say.
I'll continue to be the voice of negativity on the Avatar review, but I also don't think.
Hey,
that Quaritch,
it's Quest.
Yeah.
What do you expect?
I also don't think Quaritch is a very compelling character. But I will say this again: it's a situation of degrees, because he's definitely better than the first movie.
Yeah.
And I think that Quaritch actually gets off to a very strong start. Well, let's contextualize that. I don't like the concept of bringing him back from the dead. Okay. I don't think that's compelling, because I don't think he was a good enough antagonist in the first place. Somebody was talking on Twitter about the idea that, like, oh, people shouldn't be mad that Quaritch is back because, like, Star Wars has the same villain for its entire trilogy. And I think that's a point well taken, but we kind of closed off our business we had with Quaritch in the first movie. And by bringing him back, I'm like, well, I didn't find him that compelling before, so he's just coming back sort of arbitrarily. But I do like the underlying idea that you're throwing him into an Avatar body. So while it feels a little bit like the Emperor is back, I'm on board insofar as I like the idea that we have to wrestle with the main villain suddenly becoming what he hates. And there is a great line about that. It's like, we're back in the body of the enemy. We've got to move like them. We got to think like them, and all this. I think that's cool. And I love the moment of him picking up his own skull and crushing it.
It's like if Hamlet
it's
was
Shakespearean,
strong.
bro. It's Shakespearean.
Yeah. It's literally a moment of Quaritch being... He is a human supremacist, and yet he's like, my human self failed, and I have to make sure that my Na'vi self doesn't fail, even though I view the Na'vi as inherently worse than humans. It's such a interesting conflict of interest in his hatred of the Na'vi people.
And you're right, but my problem is it doesn't go anywhere really, and this is why I still don't like Quaritch afterwards, because beyond that moment of him crushing his own skull, I struggle to really think of a time when he really has to reflect at all upon the fact that he's now Na'vi. If anything, we see him totally embracing being Na'vi when they return to actually hunt down Jake Sully. And when he rides the Akron, he's very fast to do that the way Sully, to do it the hard way.
No, well, I would say that is, his hatred and potentially even a jealousy of Jake Sully, who has garnered a family, which Quaritch clearly wanted, with siring a son in Spider. And I think there's even a jealousy there. It's in the line reading that Stephen Lang gives when he says, Jake Sully did it the hard way. because he clearly doesn't want anything to do with the Na'vi traditions of like bonding with the animal or anything like that. But he learns that Jake Sully did it that way, and he's like, well, I have to one up him. I have to be better than him because Jake Sully is embracing this Na'vi thing wholeheartedly, but I'll do it to be better than him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's actually a fair point, Tanner. But then ultimately, that speaks to my problem of he just becomes once again, I got to go kill Jake Sully. And then aside from the spider stuff, which I do think, to what Tanner does not want to talk about, complicates his character for later down the line.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
In the context of The Way of Water, I think that the film becomes unconcerned with actually having him sort of reckon with his new body in any way.
Yeah, that's
or
fair.
sort of move his motivations beyond, I want to kill Jake. And it's not even really a thing about revenge. He has a couple throwaway lines, and there's a couple of nice reaction shots when he sees Neytiri's arrows. He's like, oh shit, here she is.
That what does
That
he
doesn't-
say? He calls Neytiri in the part of his batshit crazy wife or something like that.
Yeah.
He does
Yeah.
say that.
But I
Sully's
just, I don't-
woman.
Yeah.
I don't think it moves beyond concept for me. I think it's a good concept, but I just don't think that the film Way of Water in particular gives Quaritch a lot to do with the fact that he's in a new body and radically different and embodying the enemy now. It doesn't go anywhere for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I may poke one final hole
Okay,
in something that Abram just said. and
You
it-
poke
it's-
your holes in his ship, and then I want to
Yeah.
talk.
Let a little
sure.
water out of his bag.
Exactly. And it's the Neytiri thing that you brought up. And I do think that there is complexity to Stephen Lang's performance as Quaritch, because I think there is ever so slightly that hint of fear whenever he sees
absolutely.
Neytiri's
100%.
arrows. Because he's like,
Sure.
that's the woman who killed me. She
Yeah.
could very well do it again. But you know, obviously that can't come across because he's an Ura Semper Fi Marine. But I think it's there, like in his eyes. I think it's great.
I think you're right about that, Tanner, but I just don't think that the eyes for me are enough to make his character more complicated. Beyond
Yeah,
those, a
fair
couple
point.
interesting shots.
What he wants is him to look at the air and go, "Oh God, she's here! She could kill me."
Okay,
Nemo, what do you think?
here
I
are my
jest.
thoughts on villainy in this entire film, and actually in the entire franchise. I think that Avatar: The Way of Water kind of takes a backseat to the first one in allowing true evil to really show forth. I think that the film opens very, very strongly because ultimately these movies are about humans coming and doing their, modern capitalist human thing to Pandora, which is shown as totally deplorable, totally evil, just like awful and horrible.
Mhm.
Which James Cameron intends us to view that and go, hey, we should stop doing that to our own freaking planet before,
Yeah.
But the way that the film opens with these ships, burning a path, just like scorching the earth and then building a city in the remains of it, sets up our humans to be evil beyond like a person-to-person relationship. Like the reasons why these people are here and why they do evil things is out of greed, basically. And the way that the general in this film kind of exemplifies that, I think makes me hate her a lot more.
Yeah.
But Quaritch, because he's kind of on this separate quest, he's not really he is aligned with the humans who are pilfering this planet, but he's got his different motive. He's got to kill Jake Sully to allow the colonization by humans. That isn't strong enough compared to what he is in the first movie, where he is going to clear this place to clear resources. I think that the films this
Get
series,
the unobtainium.
yes, the unobtainium, which I guess they decided to change that up on this
Yeah,
movie.
that's not a thing anymore.
They explicitly say we're not mining anymore. We're here to settle down or whatever.
This is Avatar 2, baby. Get your sensitive ass back to Avatar 1.
So to wrap up, I think that Quaritch doesn't represent enough in this film as that pillaging, plundering human, and more as this, I don't know, errand boy to go kill Jake Sully. There is a machine behind Quaritch that is allowing all of this to happen, and I want to see a little bit more of that, a little bit more of the
absolutely.
humans destroying the world and giving the Na'vi even more reason. They have good reason to fight right now, but I just know that in the background, these humans are doing
Yeah.
some horrible stuff that doesn't like look horrible, but really is. And I want to see that a little bit more in our big bang splash dash action combat, which we get plenty of in this movie. But I feel like the combat and the action scenes in the previous one have more stakes because not only is it about Jake Sully and his family, but it's also about the planet. And I want the whole thing's about the planet. We're in another planet. Why are we in another planet if we're not going to like throw that into the balance of what could be saved or not?
Yeah, I agree with you, but I also actually no, I disagree with you. The reason I think that this film actually does the environmentalism as or anti-environmentalism as the villain of the film better is because I think it ties it down to something much more understandable and emotional. Because what the environmentalism side of this film is it's tied in through multiple strings through our characters, not necessarily because they live here and that their homes are being burned. So obviously a very powerful point. The destroying of the home tree in that first movie is, I think that sequence is better than any action sequence in this film. But I think that the stakes of on an emotional level of the environmentalism in this film is stronger because we have direct ties to what the environment is. What is the resource in this film? It's brain juice from whales. But they're not just whales. They're whales that the Tolkien, excuse me, I'm sorry. The Tolkien have philosophy, they have history, they have culture, they have bonds with the Metkaina people that we see genuinely portrayed multiple times throughout the film. So once we've realized the resource is like killing people, ostensibly, I think that's much more environmentally powerful, especially through the direct connection that we have to the Tolkien, which is the bond between Payakan and Loak. And I think that bond is fantastic and pays off very well in that final action sequence and some crazy stuff. But also, through another one of supporting characters we haven't touched on very much, but I think is my personal favorite character in the film, which is Kiri. And her attachment to Awa and the multiple shots we see of her being like a Luna Lovegood-esque, like head in the clouds character, staring at the sand, sitting in the grass, basking in the glory of these underwater creatures, which look so fantastic and are so beautifully designed. And oh my god, I just want to
they're swimming
watch this
in 3D. They're swimming like a fucking inch in front of my face.
Whoa.
Exactly, but because Kiri has this like really, I think, well performed emotional connection to the planet, to Awa, that she expresses through multiple moments of acting, and we understand Loak's connection to Payakan and Ronal's connection to her soul sister when they end up killing her, and by extension her calf. That is all like really powerful emotional stuff because we know the characters and know their connection to the environment, which on Pandora is not. Trees and whales are animals and part of our environment, so therefore we should respect them. It is, again, a layer of sci-fi bullshit that is placed upon it that I think makes it more emotionally resonant. Is these are people, these are friends. The environment is part of us. It's the great balance, it's the connection, and that I think makes that environmentalism theme, which was ever present in the first one, different, but I think stronger in a very personal, emotional way.
Yeah, Tucker, I think you're totally wrong. Because there's no sci-fi bullshit. The environmental stuff is just our environmental stuff. And
Sure.
I was kind of just being a shithead because in the reality, you're speaking about the part of the film that I love the most.
Yeah.
And it's emblematic of how I think if Jake Sully is just this kind of like marine archetype and Quaritch is just this kind of interesting concept that becomes I just got to go kill the other guy. It's the Tulkun hunters and the Hidi and all of these people that make the film so rich to me.
Absolutely.
I really do love that. The scene where all the Tulkun have come back and we're seeing the Metkaina people riding and jumping in and out of the water with them, and they're all playing together and they're talking and singing together and all this, and you see the little baby Metkaina being introduced to the Tulkun. I think that's fantastic, and it makes it hurt a lot more when we see these become exploited for resources when they are much like the actual animals of our oceans, although not nearly as smart as the Tulkun are, living creatures that have an ecosystem and a family and a world and all of that. So I think that this sort of nautical preservation and sort of nautical reverence for what is in our oceans is not even really sci-fi in Way of the Water. It is just what is happening in our waters too, and that's why I like it a lot. But because I have to be the voice of negativity, I have to still put an asterisk on that. And part of my problem is that we are told a lot about the Tulkun, but we don't see a lot about them. We sort of established this intimate relationship with Payakan, and he's sort of the outlier from my negative point, as he's the outlier from his own family. But when after that harrowing sequence where the mother is killed, we get told that this Tulkun used to sing with the leader of the Metcalfe tribe,
Ronal, please.
Ronal's wife.
No.
That
Her
Ronal
name
Kate
is
Winslet.
Ronal.
we learn that they used to sing together.
Uh-huh.
We learn through the scientist who's against the capture and killing of the Tulkun that they know all these things. We don't get to see the Tulkun together celebrating and having these cultural moments. We get told them, and I think that's part of why I just have like a general script issue with Avatar. I have issue with so few of its concepts because I really do love the Tulkun and what they represent for our world and this world, but I still just wish we got to see what they're like when they're just swimming in a pod and they're singing a song together or something. Because you really only get that through Payakan, and even that is so concerned with just his like plot level progression from being in the group to out of the group.
Mm-hmm.
Abram, I see what you're saying, but dude, I just love the Tolkien. I don't fucking care about my guy,
sure.
my G, if I can be so bold. I love the Tolkien. I think, along with you, that they are the best part of this movie. I love their inclusion. I love the characterization that they are given, the weight that they are given, with Dr. Ian Garvin saying they have philosophy, they have music, they have more neurological connections than humans do. They're far more spiritual than humans, as they are sticking a drill into its brain to suck out Amrita. Mind you.
Thank God it's called Amrita and not like Life Longanum or something like that.
They could have.
They could have done that.
And
to
I
us.
think the setup and payoff is so good in that you get the sequences of the Na'vi explaining their connection to them and how they are beings who warred thousands and thousands of years ago, but have since come to understand that violence is not a viable path forward for any living being. And then a little bit later, 20 minutes later, we cut to Scoresby manning a harpoon, being like, yeah, I don't know why they don't fight back. Bunch of dumb animals, I guess. Kadoosh! The setup and payoff is so well done there, and that's why I love the script of Avatar A, but also the inclusion of the Tolkien in it. And might I add, on the note of Amrita, I love that it's like a tube full of this liquid that can literally stop human aging. We say so in the film. It stops it. $80 million. $80 million.
Yeah.
Which by whatever 2087, whatever this year takes place.
It's the
It
most
can't be that
valuable. He said it's the most valuable substance in the universe. $80 million.
Yeah, and a tube as big as this water bottle. 80 mil.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that is exactly the Dr. Evil joke of like $1 million.
It's
Like,
It's that.
What is
It's
it? It's
funny.
supposed to be a joke?
It's not said as a joke in the
no,
movie.
it's not.
No.
But it's unfortunately it has that effect because 80 million.
A bunch of movies do that where they're like, this is a computer chip that can hack every device in the world. They're selling it for $100 million.
It's like, if you're the government, you can get that money together.
Yeah. Anyway.
But if I can respond to what you said, Tanner.
Yes, go ahead.
Would it have not deepened your resonance if instead of Ronal saying we used to sing together, we took 2 minutes out of a 3-hour-long runtime to show a flashback of them singing together? This is sort of just my problem with how Avatar 2 conveys so much information.
I think the scene of the Metcaina celebrating the return of the Tolkien is that for me. To see their connection to these things, to call them brothers and sisters, like it's like a family member coming back after a long time. It's like, here's the baby that I had. They're swimming around. They're essentially doing like dances in the water with it.
See,
Sutiri,
Rhea,
I believe.
Or however you say her name is like,
Suraya
I'm in love.
I met a boy.
Yeah.
It's just, it's all there. The heart, the love that they feel for these creatures, these living creatures that are effectively as smart or smarter than them, is all there for me. And that's why I love the Tulkun. I wish I could have a Tulkun brother.
I do too, Tanner, and I think the Tulkun are a very interesting interesting is a bad word. We got to get away from that. I think that they matter a lot in this film beyond just their connections that they have with with all of our characters, because if I think about what the film ends on, the very last moment of the film is Jake Sully realizing that he can't run anymore and that he has to stand and fight. And I think that Payakan, as this Tulkun who has rejected the path of nonviolence in the face of insurmountable evil from the Sky People, that is, I think, like where these films are going. And that's really ballsy of James Cameron to be like, okay, we're gonna make a bunch of pacifist characters, but we're gonna make the antagonist to these pacifists so bad that it makes them turn violent. And I wouldn't be surprised if we going forward see like the Tulkun rise in mass against the humans, given that we saw what one of them did. Imagine what 50 of them could do. This stuff just can't not be floating around in Cameron's mind.
Well, it's probably already on the page because the script for Avatar folder got a holy fuck.
Exactly. And Timo, you're so right, and I love that you brought this up because that is hand in hand, locked in with the environmental message that Tucker was talking about. That is the anti-colonial message that is being carried across this entire series, it seems, and is so present in Avatar: The Way of Water. Because yes, Payakan is outcast for his violent tendencies, but honestly, if I can be so radical, I'd be like, Payakan's right, dog. The humans are hunting you down, and Jake Sully says so. You can't continue to be on the run. That's what the Tulkun are doing. They're continuously migrating to stay away from the humans, from the Tulkun hunters. And Payakan's like, F that noise. We gotta stand up and fight these guys, or they're gonna keep hunting us down for the rest of our lives and sucking the juice out of our brains.
Yeah, can't have that. Brain
can't
juice.
have that.
Need that.
Yeah, you need that to live, I'm pretty sure. I think that's why the Tulkun are such a great inclusion in this, and especially Payakan. Even that he's been lightly memed on Twitter why he's such a great, I'll say it, a great character in this, and a great partner to Loak and moving forward with the Sully family.
Yeah. I also think that, and actually, you know what? Everyone respond to that because I want to switch the gear a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think Payakan is a very good character, and I think that it's bold of James Cameron to make a creature that is not like would not be traditionally considered like a mega fauna to be like a really empathetic and relatable character. I mean, how many protagonists in movies are whales? Even like kids movies, you know what I mean? Like, a whale is not, you don't empathize with the whale the way you do like the little fish of Finding Nemo or something, right? So I think it's a bold choice for him to do that, and I think his arc is quite compelling. And I just think that the idea that ultimately this film is almost like not pro eco-terrorism, but it's getting there.
It's getting there.
It's getting there. It is really getting there, which is why I think it's so exciting.
Continue, Cameron.
Yes. I think I think that part of the film is very bold because ultimately, again, I don't even view this film really about being about colonialism anymore as much as it is about the sort of eco-fascism and the need to defend the planet. Yeah. And the sort of a reverence for a planet who is about life. The idea, just the speech about water, how water flows through us and is here before we are born and after we die, and it gives everything meaning. The movie is way more about understanding your planet with a reverence and defending your planet as it stands because there's something here you're missing than it is about, I think, politics of colonialism, frankly. And that's why I'm most compelled by that through line of Way of the Water.
Yeah. And I think what's really nice about talking about Payakan and the fact that he is the one violent outcast from the Tulkun is that this movie also has some dope-ass action sequences in which these characters use a lot of violence. There's a lot of violence in this movie. Not as much as the first movie, which I think is a very good choice because I think I want to talk about a little bit the fact that this movie is so like character focused is like it's basically like a high school drama for like a solid chunk of it. But the action sequences, primarily that final 45 minutes, is James Cameron at his best combining the storytelling character potential of something like Titanic with obviously the visual concept of Titanic, of a sinking ship, with the spectacle and sci-fi concept of Avatar. And the two, I think, marry very well. We're operating on like 5 different planes of action in this action sequence because there's such a huge cast of characters that they have to balance with Kiri and Took being trapped on the ship, and then Spider's over here, and then Neytiri's up in the sky, and Quaritch is pointing the gun. You have to keep all this straight in your mind, and as the film progresses, it chips down the amounts, or as that sequence progresses, it chips down the amount of planes of action that you have to keep in your mind, but it's because they combine in really fascinating ways. And the spectacle of that final sequence, especially what Payakan is doing, is ostensibly unmatched, especially because of how incredible the CGI is. Like, watching a whale jump onto a ship and like block things with its fin like a shield, and Payakan turns his head down to rocket the harpoon like off in another direction. Like, there's such a degree of mastery of action here that it's spectacle on another level. It's not the home tree burning down in the first movie, but it's tied to, I think, a lot more varied character stakes, because as someone who's only seen this movie twice, I was really surprised by seeing this movie again. I'm like, okay, I saw it once. It was a little hard to keep up with, but I remembered like every scene and every shot and every line in this movie. And I'm like, oh my God, they did it. They made this 3.5 hour action spectacle with people with ridiculous names like so easy to follow and so easy to understand. It's because James Cameron is a master storyteller, especially with spectacle and action. And I think nowhere is that better portrayed than, of course, with parts of Titanic, but with this film and the huge cast of characters that we have to manage for like 45, 50 minutes to an hour, whatever it is, that last action sequence.
Yeah, I think the last action sequence is about 45 minutes long. And yeah, it's crazy. The action, I think, throughout the whole movie is really good, but it's clear. I could tell what's going on. I just appreciate being able to tell what's going on, even when I'm seeing, 100 frames a second. Like, I'm okay with that. Some people aren't, whatever. I think that when we get into the action and it's just like going, I'm just looking for badass moments, really. And then there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of them in this movie. So
And Neytiri does a lot of those.
yeah.
Dude,
I want to
Her choreography, oh my God.
There's one part I
Abram,
want to
say
shout
it.
out in particular. It's my favorite part of the movie. It's in the final action sequence.
Yeah.
Neytiri grabs an arrow. Let me walk you through this. She
Yeah.
grabs an arrow. She
know what you're saying.
stabs it through a man's
Yes.
chest.
Yes.
She picks him up with the arrow, knocks the arrow into her bow, fires the arrow through this dead guy's corpse. The corpse collapses, and she kills another one with that arrow.
Abram, great minds, you and me, buddy. That's the coolest shit in the goddamn universe.
It's fucking awesome.
It's, maybe I can't choose between the one that Tucker brought up as well, when Payakan fucking redirects an explosive harpoon with his head plates. Also, when he wraps the harpoon cord around his head, and he's tearing through the boat, and
God, that guy's
Ian
arm.
Garvin has that line where he's like, "Who's got the harpoon now?" Just total like cool 80s, bringing back a line that was said earlier, but now the shoe's on the other foot, and then his arm gets ripped off, and it is confirmed he's gonna be in the next one. He's gonna have a robot arm, and he's gonna be like futuristic Moby Dick, and it's gonna be awesome.
I can't wait.
I also want to shout out, because I think James Cameron is really good at details in his action sequences. I think my favorite action sequence is actually when the kids get captured by the old shack and Jake and Neytiri come to rescue them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great
Because there's a
sequence
lot
as
of
well, yeah.
really great small moments in that. My favorite is it's just an insert shot of Jake takes out his tomahawk and he
Flips
flips
it a
it,
little bit.
around.
Yeah.
He just flips it so that big fucking
The
spike on the other end of it is what he goes and because you can presume the film's actually very brutally violent. It just does a good job of cutting smartly so you know what just happened, but it's not R-rated violence. But he's putting a spike in the back of a tomahawk like this long through somebody's head.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And I think it takes a really great attention to detail in shot composition and choreography to sell that at PG-13 with the level of weight that this film does.
Yeah.
So I think the action choreography needs to be shouted out for sure.
Small detail in an action scene that I love, it's at the very end again, and it's when we're firing bullets into the water, obviously trying to get at all these other Na'vi that are riding their water mounts, and you see the bullets tumble. And it's just like, that's so cool to me. It's a small thing. We don't have to talk. It's nothing worth discussion, but it's just like, you see the bullets like shoot it and they go like whoosh, 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 whoosh. Because usually in action movies, it's just shoot and nothing. But you see them tumble around. it blew my mind. James
Like some
Cameron,
shit like Saving Private Ryan or, you know.
yeah, any bullshit like that.
Yeah.
James Cameron was robbed of a director nomination. I'll say it.
Let me say this then, Tanner. I think that last action sequence is exhausting and way too long.
Oh, okay. I think James Cameron is a master of the third act, just to show where I stand.
Well, and see, this is what I'm interested to talk about this because it's actually it's the details in the action that I love, but it's that overall construction of that final 45 minutes that I think really drags the film down for me because it ends up becoming, in my opinion, just too much. And I mean that in a largely number of minutes, and again, to my point from earlier, in the repetition of beats. We see the kids get captured and tied up to various things on this ship multiple times.
Yeah.
And we're coming and going from this ship over and over and over again, and it's twisting and tumbling and turning. And I get that it's an homage to Titanic, but I've already seen Titanic. And so I think my problem with that last 45 minutes is that I love it when it feels fresh and it feels dynamic as Payakan is attacking. But then I feel like it just loses a little something. It feels like now the kids are now they're tied up. Now the kids are free. Now they're tied up. Now they're free. Now the kids are tied up. Now we're near the final showdown. And I just don't understand why it needed to play out in that manner. And I don't know why it needed to happen for so long. I feel like the film doesn't drag, but it nonetheless feels too long. I feel I'm engaged for the entire runtime, but then I think to myself, like, man, we're still in this action sequence, or man, we're still just hanging out under the water. I really do think that you could have cut a fair amount of this film out or used that runtime differently. And that last action sequence, to me, is a good example of it.
I think the reason I disagree about that is in terms of the pacing, the character moments, and the variety within a single action sequence. I think that third act, which is a full action sequence, is so well done because it's never the same. Yes, it's repeating the same, like, basic large-scale concept of someone is tied up, but the stakes of who is tied up and where they're tied up and who has the ability to go get them and where are the other chess pieces on this board at this moment and how far down is the ship into the water, and like the stakes are riveted up. The time of day is changing, the location and places of each family member is changing, and the family dynamic is changing as Natayam's sacrifice is like 2/3 through that action sequence, and that absolutely ratchets up the stakes because suddenly Jake and Neytiri are on another level of focus and anger and violence, and that makes that choreography a step above what happened before. And then the stakes are upped even more as water's filling everything and Took gets like sucked into this dark hole, and like these things
Landing
are
and payoff.
such memorable moments. Yeah, exactly.
Some dude
And
dies
they
in
have
that
such
hole
great
like way
payoffs.
earlier in the fight.
Oh, true. No, yeah. But it's never the same, and it's like a movie in and of itself. It's like I can see the progression of each of these people. They each have like an arc through who they're saving and what their actions are over the course of this action sequence. So I can't really see too much of it being cut out. I think you're right. There's probably a character, a moment that could be removed or trimmed out or changed. But I think that what is included is very deliberate, which is why I challenge the idea that certain moments of this film can be cut out, because I even think that this movie would benefit from being longer only because there are certain sequences that end so quickly. They end so quickly and the line's finished and we're on to something else across the planet. And I think that that is them like shaving seconds off. They're like, oh God, oh man, oh this is too long. We need to make it somewhat more manageable. End the scene here instead of here. And honestly, I think that if I were to complain about something in this movie, it's Neytiri not having enough to do. We haven't really talked about, but Natayam he's a sacrifice, but he's the worst one, so it's okay that he died. And that there are moments where I feel that they cut things out because scenes will go pop, but that's not true in that final action sequence, because I think that's where most of the action or most of the concept was the attention to detail was put, because they don't end moments there like very jarringly. They flow them into something else that makes that last 45 minutes, at least for me, feel like 20. I mean, overall, I think this film is so well paced in cutting back to Korich and spending some time with the kids and spending some time with Jake that I don't feel it's runtime. Tanner and I both got up at the same time when Korich is like learning to ride his mount, and we're like, this is a breezy film, isn't it? Even though it's so long, it's so well handled in terms of the mastery of the pacing that I don't think much can be cut at all without losing so much of the character richness detail that the film provides us.
I'm gonna say that I was very much expecting to fall asleep in the theater when I went this morning to watch it. I'm not an early riser, and I had to rise a couple hours earlier than I normally do to go view this movie. And I was like, well, I mean, we'll see. If I fall asleep, that's gonna say something. Nope, didn't fall asleep at all. Totally wide awake, totally watching the whole thing. And I thought that the first time I saw the film, I agreed with you, Abram, that the ending sequence kind of went on a long time. And when I got to the ending sequence the first time, I said, "Oh, we're in this for the rest of the movie. This is the final part of the film. Is here in this fight scene on this crazy ass hydrofoil chronoplon boat kind of thing. Crazy." Yeah, you look those words up. I know what I'm talking about.
Jesus.
I'm sure you do.
But this time I didn't. I was just kind of like watching it for what was happening and everything that was going on. I think, Tucker, you're right. It flowed one thing into another. And the ending sequence like came, and then we were into the denouement like before I really knew it. I mean, there's so much that like the ending sequence builds up for in continuous time. We have going out to sea, we have
Yeah.
finding like there's a lot of continuous time at the end of the movie, which could maybe add to that feeling of a little bit lengthy sequence. But when we get into the fight, I become absorbed in the action and the choreography, and my like I'm ringing the badassery bell like every couple frames because like there's just cool shit happening. And I think that the rule of cool is not always a great rule to follow for best picture nominees and best picture winners, because like we look for a lot of stuff. But this film, I think, successfully melds rule of cool with some meaning. I think
Yeah.
that those two things are a little mutually exclusive. You can't have too much cool and have too much thematic meaning, but this film strikes a balance where it's like we've got plenty of cool and just enough meaning where I care that this, and then I get to see the cool shit happen and be entertained as like a troglodyte brain movie watcher.
Troglodyte brain movie watch.
I think the reason for me that it does feel long is I don't think that there's enough meaning there, and it comes principally from sort of a compounding issue that reaches its head with the death of Neteam, who I just don't think is given enough to do, to where when he dies, I don't feel it. Certainly not the way I would have felt it if probably any of the other kids would have died, and I think the challenge for me then becomes if Jake Sully's entire arc is about protection, I don't really see a lot of him reconciling with the fact that he couldn't protect his son then.
Yeah.
Because it very quickly turns on a dime to be, okay, well, fuck it. I got to go kill Quaritch. Now, ultimately, you understand that linear rage impulse of my son is dead, so you're going to die now too. The son for a son idea, or I just can't have you following my family anymore, as Quaritch sort of goads him into believing. But my problem is we're over Neteam's body for maybe 30 seconds before it's time to go back to the ship and have a knife fight. And even
I don't know if that's exactly true. It might feel like that, but I think it's significantly longer than that.
Or I'll challenge you in this way then of what does he say or do that shows some sort of reflection or contemplation on this arc of protection of a son, because he goes and he fights Quaritch, and then in that denouement afterwards, we see him be given back to the ocean and we become like brought into the Metcaina tribe. But where is the moment of him really reflecting on his son being dead? I think we get a lot more emotion out of Neytiri.
If I may, Abram,
Sure.
I think that the consequence of that for Jake does come at the end. There's a reason we do Neteam's funeral at the end, and it is for that protection of a son thing to come around. But it's especially after Jake has fully learned his lesson. He's completed his arc. He allowed Loak, who he pretty blatantly viewed as a screw-up, the screw-up younger son, to save him, to rescue him, to bring him through the boat, and really follow his lead. And I think that's when he sort of discovered that is when the coping with Neteam's death happens, because he can visit him in the spirit tree and things like that, and he fully, I feel, ingratiates Spider into the Sully clan as well. He says a son for a son or something along those lines. So yeah, and I'm not gonna act like that's 100% perfect. I'm not going to act like that's, a good way to pay that off, because Abram, we've been all pushing back on the points that you've been bringing up, but I think there's elements of truth to everything that you've said, for me personally at least. And even Tucker would admit, he openly admitted it, in fact, opening night when we saw this film, that Neteyam's the worst one. And I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it is a script issue with Neteyam, in that you feel that way about him. I'm not like getting emotional that Neteyam died. We should have gotten more stuff with Neteyam. He is the guy that's always there next to Loak when he screws up, but he's not much outside of that. And I feel like that is an issue.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason that he feels so left out is not only does he have much less to do in terms of like plot progression, like, okay, obviously the Pycon and Loak bond is going to be important for future movies. Kiri being the daughter of Grace and having the curse of AY in her, and like being the adopted one, like these are really interesting things. But his
Took is
role
busy
as,
being cute.
Yeah, she's little, and she will probably grow up to be a significantly more important character in the future. But Neteyam comes at the cost. Neteyam is the sacrifice, literally in the film, but also I think conceptually, because I think the idea of that he brings out things out of Loak, and he complicates the relationship between Loak and his father, and his sacrifice is what I think will ultimately really bring the Sully clan together in future installments. I think he's necessary, but he's also not the greatest character, because I think importantly so, and rightfully so, need to spend so much more time developing Kiri and Loak's all their different personality elements and story elements that are so prevalent in what I called earlier the high school drama section of the film, which I think is probably my favorite part of the movie, is getting the Sully clan to learn how the Metcalfe live, and developing the sort of will they won't they with Saraya, and the rivalry with her brother, and the moment when they're on the beach and he's like, oh, look what I can do with this fist, and punches him in the face. Like,
it's called a punch, bitch.
All of this is pretty simple. It's high school drama stuff. I've seen like protect your siblings in high school movies before. I've seen fall in love with a girl but like kind of don't really tell her things in movies before. But that really, I think, is what humanizes this group of characters and makes me love these kids so much. Neteyam is not a huge part of that. He is a fuel for Kiri and for Jake and for Loak, but that part of the movie bonding me to this group of characters as children, as quote unquote human characters that I can relate to these elements of. I think that's the best part of the film, but it's because Neteyam is not that prevalent. I think there's a better Avatar: The Way of Water out there where he is more prevalent and his sacrifice means more. Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest knocks against this movie, but I can also understand why he was the sacrifice character. And this is similar. I can draw a similar comparison to one of my biggest complaints with one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Marvel's The Avengers from 2012. Clint Barton is a nothing character in that movie. He's my favorite. He was my favorite Avenger at the time. He still continues to be. But he comes at the sacrifice of making everyone else more interesting. And I think that's just a balancing thing that sometimes I understand out of such a gigantic cast. And I'm like, it's okay that the cast isn't perfectly balanced, because the pros, I think, easily outweigh the cons in this situation. Though there exists a better balance out there. I will never deny that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I see. I hear what you're saying. I think it just doesn't outweigh it for me, because ultimately, if the film is so much about family, then I need to care more when a member of the family is killed, not even just like captured or something. Like their son was murdered, but we don't care enough, and I think that speaks to a pretty significant issue with the script, and sort of then how that sort of translates into how we resonate with and take something out of the themes and character arcs, when this moment that is so pivotal and sort of selling all of that ends up falling flat. At least for me, it's a pretty significant issue with sort of what I leave the film thinking about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where else I want to go with this. Okay, I said something. Tech? Oh, yeah, sure. Let's talk about the technical achievement, because we spent a lot of time talking about the script and the characters. And again, I think Abrams' knocks against all that stuff are valid. I think there are elements of truth, again, as I said, for me, with all the things that you've said. But when I think about Avatar: The Way of Water as a Best Picture nominee, it is the insurmountable technical achievement that this film is. And I say insurmountable, knowing and assuming, rather, that James Cameron will surmount that achievement 2 or 3 more times in the coming years.
Yeah.
And it's insane to me that that prospect is even possible, because you're looking at this and there are fleeting moments in my mind in the theater where I'm like, this is all CGI. I am
I like
looking
remember.
into
I like to have to tell myself that throughout the movie that
Exactly.
this is not real. None of it. Like literally, like none of it.
I'm looking into the eyes of a being that does not exist in the real world, and yet to me, in this moment, it does. And none of this is going to be new that we say. I think this has been said in a lot of times in a lot better ways. But just the feat of creating the world of Pandora and refreshing it with this new the Metcaina tribe is just amazing. The sea creatures, the underwater environments, the designs of the village that they live in, and Tucker and I love talking about the bouncy walkways. We love the bouncy walkways.
Man, if I could walk to class on those, I think I would
I would
never
walk to class
graduate.
20 miles.
Every
If-
single detail is thought out. It is so well executed. It is so well designed. It is so well rendered, and it is so well implemented into the filmic world of Avatar: The Way of Water. That is what I think of when I think of Avatar.
100%.
I think where this film, just to point out a specific reason that this film is that technical leap forward compared to the last one, is in our close-up shots. This film dares to do inserts, which the first one didn't because they couldn't. They knew that it wasn't possible to get CGI of very close-up objects looking as good as they needed, but now they can. And I mean, this is a shot that has been dissected endlessly online of video guy. But the shot of Jake Sully when he's getting on the sea mount and like there's the water splashing around and it's just like his hand and the top of the beast.
He grabs a strip of like leather and wraps it around his hand.
Wraps it around and
Is it CGI? Is it a painted blue hand? It's like it's impossible to tell. Like I cannot tell. And I think I remember learning about the reason why this film looks so good is that they just spend a lot of time figuring out how to animate wet things, and that the animation processes for stuff that is wet, that isn't like submerged in water, but like has water on it or has been recently in water, wasn't there, and so they just didn't know how to do this in CGI. And then the people at Weta figured that out, and it really shows in the movie.
Weta.
Weta?
No, it's so similar to water and wetness. They better be good at it.
Yeah, I guess so.
True. So I think that just like those technical achievements plus all the free diving underwater mocap nonsense. I mean, really, Cameron it feels like the only working director today that like wants to use this kind of technology, but at least he's developing it so like in years going forward, some other people can do creative stuff with it too.
Yeah. Someone will. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of reasons that I still like the movie, even though I've got so many problems with it in the sort of verticals of things I usually look for the most when I'm watching my movies. And it is not only the sort of like the spectacle, but the craft of it and what that craft was used on. And to that first point, you're right that all this is not real, but nonetheless, actors were told you're going to learn how to hold your breath underwater for a long fucking time to make this movie. And we're going to figure out we're going to make crazy new cameras, and we're going to have all these new techniques and processes to where it feels so handmade despite being so computer generated. And I think that's a really great testament to a creator using tools that are in other instances supplanting like a human touch to make that human touch feel more magical while still retaining that like authorial intent. So I think that's really impressive. But I also just think it's really wonderful that it's used to make the ocean and nature more alive and more fantasy and sci-fi and all of this, because I think that the film does sort of exist at the intersection of both, like a lot of great fiction does. But we're not. This isn't Ant-Man Quantumania where we're making like the quantum realm and all this shit. We're making an ocean that is full of life and ecology and all
Yeah.
of this, and that's what we're putting all of this work towards. And I think that's really wonderful because it feels so purposeful. And it does go
100%.
back a little bit to theme, I think, as we're saying about this sort of reverence for nature and potential pro-ecofascism.
If nature isn't beautiful, why should we care about it?
Right.
Abram,
and-
I also want to point out that
Yeah.
I don't think it's ecofascism. I don't think it's that. It's
Sorry.
Yeah, it's
you're
probably
right.
not
It's
ecofascism.
not ecofascism.
That's like we will kill anyone we need to preserve the planet.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
That was a misspoke. If
Yeah.
So I think that's really lovely, and it does just look wonderful. For as much as I think that the pacing could be changed a little bit, I like that James Cameron's just a man with a big old pair of balls that says, you know what, we're gonna go diving, and if you don't like it, you can go fuck yourself because we're gonna be under the water
Go
for
to
a
the
long
bathroom.
time.
hmm
Yeah.
And I think that's really wonderful. And I just personally, I'm from the Maine coast, so I always look at the ocean as something of reverence and something mystical. And he gave me that. So I really do love a lot of the technical film beyond the fact that it's just technically impressive. I think it's thematically rich too.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I think it also feels very personal. Tanner and I and a group of our friends did something very interesting before we watched
doubt it.
Avatar: The Way of Water. I know, it's uncommon, but whatever. Is we watched every single film that James Cameron has ever directed.
Yes.
And one thing that you learn about James Cameron, and if you're like online at all, and if you don't know anything about film history, is that this man loves water more than his wife and children, I assume. And this film
I don't think he has
feels
a
like
wife
the
anymore.
culmination. He might have a new one. I don't know.
I don't
I don't keep up with Big Jim. But this film feels like the culmination of
Mhm.
his filmography in a really interesting way. Of we've had lots of presence of water in films, even like the opening shot in Piranha 2: The Spawning, which is a terrible movie. Oh my god, I can't
Really
believe the
bad.
guy that made Titanic and Avatar made that fucking movie. But even like every one of his movies includes something about water or some kind of underwater action sequence or thematically is about water in some way. But I think making his 13-year time gap placed onto a film that is so about water in a thematic way, as you said, in a technological way, as we've been saying, and that's obvious. That's all very obvious if you're watching this movie. It's like I like fish tanks a lot. Like they make me giddy, and my girlfriend can attest to that. And this film it scratches that itch absolutely on like a very deep personal level. But I also recognize that unlike a lot of films that are made with this kind of budget and on this kind of time scale and on especially in a franchise day and age, this feels so personal. Like we stepped away from the crazy amazing forests of Pandora from the first movie that like everyone loved so much that it gave them like post Pandora depression, and he's like, no, this time we're going to something that's so important to me is the water and his ocean creatures and his water ecology and ecosystems. It is like a clearly a passion project, and like every fish and every way that the fish interact with each other, interact with Kiri, and interact with the environment, you can tell that like he made thousands of people make each little bit because he knew that it was A, gonna look fucking awesome, but
Mhm.
B, meant so much to him, and is why this film, I agree with Tanner, is I think he was snubbed for a director nomination here because this, even more so than many other films that were nominated for Best Picture, feels so personal. Is I can feel his artistic vision, his like political views, and like what he's passionate about flow, pun intended, through this movie so strongly, stronger than basically any other movie last year, or that I can think of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He also made those big crabs that can punch. I love
Those
those.
are awesome.
I love
Those
the
are
crabs
cool.
that
The
can
crab
punch.
mechs. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. I don't
I
know if
do-
I. Oh.
He made seaweed bubbles that they can like
Yeah.
stick their heads up into. Those are so cool.
So cool.
Cool.
I have one other point of discussion that I want to get to.
Okay.
That's not necessarily about this film specifically, but Abram, you had something.
Yeah, if I can intercede before we do that, I was just
What
I was,
negativity you get this time?
No, this is more
This is
just like
positivity. This is positivity.
it's actually not positivity, but it's not negativity either. It's just a thought.
Okay.
Oh,
I was sitting in the theater watching the film and just thinking about how remarkable it is that we are watching these sort of as we grow up. I mean, because I talk to like my dad or people of my dad's age talking about seeing Star Wars when they were kids or like we're not kids anymore. We're all fucking old
Well,
crotchety
at heart.
adults.
I was drinking a beer at the beginning of this episode.
I was drinking a beer watching Avatar 2 the first time I saw it.
Hello.
But I do think that there is just something interesting and exciting about films that are going to. If you don't think Avatar has cultural significance, your name is either Abram Buner circa 4 months ago, or you're stupid.
Well, those are one and the same, really.
I think it'll be cool to sort of reflect back on what Avatar becomes, because watching it the first time, like, these character names are horse shit. This fucking world building is nonsense. But would I have not felt the same way watching Empire Strikes Back as a canon of visual language and characters and mythos being like created before me? I think it's interesting watching sort of a new like pop culture tenet be developed in front of us, because the MCU isn't even that. The MCU's been around, or the Marvel universe has been around for so long. It's not new at all. But Avatar came out of one man's fucking mind.
Yeah, this is
I think that's very cool.
original. Yeah.
Yeah,
Abram-
I think it's very cool.
The thing that I will say about that is I keep thinking about this for what this film means to me and will mean in the future is a lot of these problems that we have with the film can be written off because there's stuff coming in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But on a very subjective level, because I'm someone who is so fascinated by franchise filmmaking, particularly the MCU, I don't find that as a negative. I find that as a strength of the creative vision of James Cameron, is he is showing us not much Neytiri in this movie. Took is just a little girl and she's cute and we love her because she's cute. Quaritch not having that resolution about how does he feel about the fact that he's in the enemy's body. All these things are set up, and I can feel that they are being set up for the future. And I can feel the moment when Loak reaches out and touches Payakon's fin, which is probably my favorite shot in the entire movie. Holy, good lord, that's a great shot. Some great just framing, cinematography in this movie in general, we'll probably talk about. But I can feel these moments becoming iconic as we watch more of these films and are able to retrospectively look back at what this film set up. And when I was walking out of the theater, I was talking to Tanner, and I was like, look, this film set up so many characters that I not only care about now, but know I will care about more in the future. And I think that's really impressive. And I don't know if I've ever really felt that before. And maybe it's, I think it's something you can levy criticism at, saying, oh, they should have made within this one film each of these character arcs more complete and more resolute and all of this stuff. But I know with franchise filmmaking and with the creative vision of James Cameron that each of these things will be paid off, and that this is just the start of something or the middle of something, and that the payoff and emotional resolution is coming in the future. And I really respect that on a personal level. And I am so excited to be, like you said, Abram, on essentially the refresh of the great cinematic series achievement of our time. And learning about Loak and Neteyam and Took and Kiri, like Spider, these are characters that we didn't know about 3 months ago. And we're going to know their stories so intimately over the course of the next 10 years that it's not even funny. Like, I would contend that by the end of whoever knows, 4 film, 5 film, 6 film, 7 film arc, that we know these people, their passions, their histories better or on the same level as we like think about Han Solo and Chewbacca and Luke Skywalker, because they have been built up so well over the course of decades of time. But Avatar we don't have the retrospect for that yet, because it's one film 13 years ago that, did any of us see that in theaters? I certainly didn't.
No, I didn't see it in theaters.
But having this experience now, I'm like, hold on. This is something so special.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I saw Avatar in the first Avatar in theaters about 5 months ago.
Oh, so did I.
So did we.
Yeah.
Should I
we-
just say?
Okay.
No.
Let's pull up some
Kimo,
score sheets, but Tanner,
Okay.
you get on your thing, because we
Can I just say that we're all smart fellas and boys over here that can read
Not
each
far
other's
fellas,
minds, because this is exactly what I was going to bring up. Is what Abram brought up, and then Tucker, you spun off of. Is that it is, and you guys, you said my thoughts exactly. It is so exciting and invigorating to, fair point, to be in the next cultural phenomenon. And it's even similar to like, it's similar to Star Wars in that it's original, but it's also similar to like Lord of the Rings, because I foresee each and every one of these being nominated for Best Picture, at least to the James Cameron quintilogy, I guess, is what he's doing. And yeah, it's just so exciting to be living in it. And I can't imagine myself trying to rewatch Avatar or The Way of Water in 2024 to prepare for the Seed Bearer. I'm like, I'm gonna go to a movie theater and sit in a movie theater for 6 hours to refresh my mind for these films, because that is what James Cameron is encouraging and I would say subtly demanding, or maybe not so subtly, demanding of his audience.
There is one.
You gotta see these in theaters.
He's like, there's only one place you can go see it, and it's in every single fucking theater in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to me because
Still.
like even Lord of the Rings, it is now a staple to like, oh, people watch those every New Year's or whatever, or every Christmas. They watch the Lord of the Rings at home or whatever. But I just can't imagine doing that with Avatar, having now seen the series installments 3 times in theaters.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, but the timing just unfortunately didn't work out for me to do it in the order of the films. But I have to watch Avatar 1 for a film class I'm in tomorrow, and like I'm gonna be watching off of a Blu-ray on a 4K TV, so it's not gonna be on my phone, but it's still not gonna be in the theater. So I think it'll be an interesting sort of test of time to watch Way of the Water and not be wowed by its technical fidelity and see where we fall on it.
Yeah.
Sure. Not as anything more than a thought exercise, but I think it'll be cool to see how these films in particular age
Hey,
through that lens.
I watched Avatar 1 on my laptop on the plane, and I loved it. So,
Right.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about that comment specifically, and of course, it's not what James Cameron wants. And
No.
autorial vision be damned, my boy can watch a movie on his laptop. But that is the way that most people for the rest of the time are going to watch these movies. And I think that is true for The Lord of the Rings. Oh yeah, absolutely. You should have seen those in theaters. Jaws, should have seen that in theaters. Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Back to the Future. These are all movies that absolutely are better on the theater experience. But guess what? I watched A New Hope and Back to the Future and Fellowship of the Ring on a DVD somewhere. In what, 720p because it's a DVD? And they were still some of the greatest films I've ever seen. And I think that I know that the storytelling potential is different and the tech potential is different, but these films becoming iconic, and especially watching the development of these characters over the course of more movies, I don't foresee myself rewatching Way of the Water and like seriously lamenting to a detrimental degree that I'm not seeing it in theaters, because I saw it in theaters, I was wowed twice, and I love these characters. I want to see more of them. I want to understand them better. I want to rewatch the films and remember these moments and remember how I felt. And that's how people watch Lord of the Rings and Star Wars again and again and again on DVDs at home. And it's worse, but it's not like the end of the world.
We'll talk shut the hell up for 2 seconds.
I want to gatekeep
okay.
something.
That's
right?
true. Shut
My
the hell
feeling
up.
is I didn't see Star Wars in theaters, so I can't gatekeep it. I've seen Avatar in theaters. I can gatekeep it.
There you go.
Now.
That's what it is. We're gonna be the old cronies, 50 plus years old.
You youngins don't know what the 3D
You didn't see
was
Avatar
like.
in theaters. That's the issue.
Okay.
But yeah, I do have to say I am repping red under my blue because I'm shouting out the Ash people in Avatar: The Seed Bearer, the red Na'vi. We're so excited, baby. Come on.
God damn.
All right, let's give
I
this
want
thing
them
a
all to be
score.
different shades of blue.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
I want to see what the score
Sure.
is. How we're
50
gonna
Shades.
remember
Okay,
this
okay,
movie.
okay. Let's do
I
it.
already typed a number in.
All right.
3,
2.
2, 1.
Bing, bing, boom, 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 boom. Oh, I gave it the right score. Okay, the average score is 8.5, and that's what I gave it. Abram gave it a 7.2. Tanner gave it an 8.7. Tucker gave it a 9.7. So that's a pretty big spread, actually. But we think it's the number 3 movie on our list right now. That's what we think.
Yeah.
That's what we
Absolutely.
think.
And I think that's
fair.
totally deserved.
Yeah.
Obviously,
These are all great films.
These are good
Let's be
movies.
serious.
we're off to a great start. And guess what, boys? It's not stopping soon.
Where are we going next?
There's other great movies.
Where are we going
oh my
next?
God.
Next, we're drop the Ava, folks. Drop the Ava.
the
We are
Ava.
going just tar. Add a little tilde above that A. We're going to 2022's Todd Fields.
There
Tar.
it is. Tar.
There it is.
Yeah, available on physical and digital. Peacock, if you have it, it's streaming on there. Yep, sorry.
You don't.
Everyone grab a bucket. I said the word Peacock. But yeah.
Peacock has the tar.
Man,
has the
you know,
tar.
I really didn't know what to think about this movie when I watched it the first time. I was really just kind of like after it was done. So I'm looking forward to having a real opinion this second time around.
Yeah.
I haven't seen
Well,
it.
can I
This
do
is
a
the
closing
first
thought
time
about the
watch.
fact that I almost gave it a 10 out of 10?
Sure.
Sure. We'll allow it.
Thanks for allowing it. I 4 or 5 months ago, whenever it was before Tanner and I saw Avatar 1 in theaters again,
Mhm.
I was not on the Avatar has no cultural significance thing because as a film history student, I know that the film is revolutionary and obviously it's the number one highest grossing film of all time. I know this is number 4, which is crazy. It's not gonna beat the first one, but that's okay. It's still number 4 of all time. But I have been ingratiated into a world of characters and film that I don't think I have been almost ever. The MCU is something I'm very passionate about, but the creative vision of James Cameron to make a film 13 years ago and come back and do it the same and better and bigger and making almost the same amount of money is I film history feat that will probably be recreated in the future with other Avatar movies or maybe another franchise, in 20, 30 years.
Rebel
But it's something
Moon.
that has not been done before to this level outside of the MCU. And it's really interesting for me to reflect on my passion for this film specifically because I, again, did not see Avatar 1 in theaters, but watching The Way of Water and feeling like, wait, this is my I love Star Wars. This is my Star Wars. This is my Lord of the Rings.
My Star Wars.
I don't like Lord of the Rings much, but I respect it. And I could feel myself as I was watching it, knowing that I'm going to be the guy that I hear talk about Lord of the Rings now.
Exactly. Yeah.
In 30 years
Yeah.
about Avatar, and I'll be like, actually, if you pay attention to Spider's character arc from when he was introduced in Way of the Water, like that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's what's so exciting
And I
about
think it's
it.
really fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's so cool that a movie like this that doesn't have the deepest plot, that does have some pretty archetypical characters, but it is so technically masterful and is such a creative vision of one of the great auteurs of cinema history, can be nominated alongside something like Tar, which is another movie I love. But I'm someone who likes franchises, who likes sci-fi, who likes spectacle, and Avatar: The Way of Water, I think, hits on all those marks, but with a more direct creative vision that we have sort of sometimes lost with some of these big blockbuster films. I can feel the passion here, and I'm so happy it was nominated for Best Picture because we get to have this analytical breakdown, full feature-length analytical breakdown of this movie that's kind of just a popcorn blockbuster, but it can be so much more than that if you let it. If you let Jim into your heart.
Let
Well,
Cameron speak to you. We'll have to see.
Timo needs to let Jim out of his heart, or out of his bladder, rather.
God, I've had to pee so bad for the last half of this review, and Tucker's
Way
is
of Water,
going on.
baby.
The Way of Water
Flows through all
never
things.
it always starts
It's
and it
flowing
never
through him.
ends. But next time we're gonna be watching Todd Field's Tar. I think I speak for the Met Cayena people when I do the opposite of what I did last episode. Until next time, until we talk about Tar, war. Ah.
Yeah.
Tell you what?
The thing you just told
Who
me.
needs to say what?
Oh, Timo, can you get a little bluer for this Avatar review?
Oh, I see. Oh, you know what?
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Now that's like a gray blue.
Honestly,
Well-
Tucker, if we're gonna say that your shirt is blue, that shirt is
change. I can wear some.
Yeah, fuck you, buddy.
This is a. All right, the lighting isn't helping my
How's
case.
this for
Ooh,
blue?
that's blue as fuck.
that's
Okay.
blue.
All right, bitches.
I don't think
What's
anyone
the
wears
line
Does this
that
help?
Porridge says in there? I'm feeling kind of blue. Whatever.
I know what you're
Why
thinking.
no? Why so blue?
I know what
I
you're
I'm
thinking.
thinking. Why so blue?
Why so
No, you gotta get the pause for dramatic effect.
And he has like a little smirk because he knows it's stupid.
Yeah,
Why
insane,
so
like,
blue?
insane dick
"Hoorah!"
riding. Insane dick riding in that room for laughing at that joke.